Good evening. I'm going to give a little review of a very complicated lecture, Lecture 4 of the Foundations of Esotericism that Rudolf gave in 1905. So far we've had 3 lectures and I've tried to enumerate a sort of theme in each lecture. The first lecture was about the 7 stages of consciousness, which we will come back to. The second lecture we had as a theme the 3 ideas of human nature: the activity of movement or karma, wisdom, which is called the word, and the will, the creative will of the future. In lecture 3 I had the 3 elements of evolution: form, life and consciousness, even though in that particular lecture that's not developed very far. In this lecture, lecture 4, the 4th theme, I've put as the 3 organs of the future human being, in relationship also to how we can learn our future human being from the ants and the bees, and also how we can learn about our role as creative beings from the formation of carbon, the role of carbon in the world. So that all sounds very complicated, and it is very complicated. Again, these lectures are very aphoristic. They are shorthand notes, and so each sentence is very pithy, and I'm well aware that these short introductions probably don't give very much insight. However, we are working with the theme we are working with the theme that Rudolf Steiner is developing his ideas of evolution from the point of view of consciousness. And so in this particular lecture he refers to the ant heaps and to the bees as 2 states of consciousness that we need to look at about where we can go in the future. And when he looks at the ants, he says, and the bees, we have sort of a participation or a partition of 3 types of creatures within the whole organism of the ant heap or the beehive, which is the queen, the male bees and the workers, and that the sexuality, the reproduction, is confined to the queen and a few drones, but mainly the workers are the major purpose of the ant heap. And the future development is that the ants don't develop quite as far as the bees, in that the bees start to build cells. They build hexagonal cells, and that is a slightly higher development. But these 2 stages of development of how we can relate as a human being to what the ants and what the bees can teach us is really, really important. And he tells us, building on some of the earlier thoughts in these lectures, that the human being will have to create within themselves a division, or it will divide within us how our thinking and our feeling and our willing will isolate in different parts of the brain, and that we will, through our higher self, through our spiritual development, have to learn to keep a moral relationship between what happens in the forebrain, the middle brain, and the brain at the back of our head, so our thinking, our feeling and willing. And he says we have to learn in a way that we are in a cosmos of duality, so we have come from a oneness, and we are present in the cosmos of duality. And he begins to use some of the language, which is probably right now a little antiquated and requires a bit of a comment, in that he says we will need to learn to balance the masculine part of our body and the feminine part of our humanity and the working part of our body in the future. And he says that the reproduction of the human being in the future will come from an individual, where the male and the female bodies have transformed into another part. And I think the comment to be made is that we can already see a shift in a direction where one's gender is being defined individually, separate from the biological body. That we're not man or woman anymore. There's so many genders. We may have a particular biological or genetical body, but our capacity to be creative in the world through a gender is very fluid at the moment, and we can already see a shift in this direction that Steiner's talking about. But he pushes that to a far degree into the future, where he says that in the future the human being themselves will become creative, in that we will be able to transform our ideas through warming them with our feelings, and then through the spoken word we will procreate. Now that is a very big theme, and again, if that is a theme that is quite a confronting idea, we're saying that some of these ideas are rentable ideas. Let's take them, ponder them. If they make sense, keep developing them. That's the idea with Rudolf Steiner's work, is that many of these ideas we just have to let them sort of lie there in the account and to mature, and at some point to say, well, look, I just can't go there. Or in a few years or after a few readings, one goes, actually, that's starting to make sense. I think I'll keep that idea. That's why we call them rentable ideas. Let's rent these ideas for a moment, ponder them. If you don't like them, you can give them back to the owner. But where he goes with that is very much an alchemical thing in this particular lecture, in that there is an ancient alchemical idea, and that is of the Philosopher's Stone. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone worked with this idea. But the Philosopher's Stone was, at one level, where the alchemists were trying to make gold from particular metals. In Rudolf Steiner's language, he starts to work with the idea that carbon is the Philosopher's Stone. So in this particular lecture, he talks about coal. Now, coal, of course, requires a bit of a comment in our day and age, especially in Australia with fossil fuels, and that there is an incredible investment in some people wanting to invest in fossil fuels for profit. But if we look at the process of coal, he really talks about how the mineral world has come from earlier plant material, so from peat through to oil and coal, and then the harder rocks such as diamonds and that, whereas the limestones come from the animals, the juras come from the calcium of the shellfish and all those sorts of things. But the plant kingdom gradually passes over into the mineral kingdom, and as we see this, especially with coal, is still at a point where we can unleash the magical power of the ancient plant worlds, but that's not necessarily a positive thing. He's not promoting that. He's just saying that is what has driven the Industrial Revolution over the last 500 years, and really queries how we need to go on with that. However, what he does point us to is that the human being needs to learn eventually that we will be able to administer carbon a little bit like the plants can in the future. That we at this point breathe in oxygen, and breathe out carbon dioxide, but the trees breathe in the carbon and build living being. And he says in the future the human beings will, once we have gone through an evolution where, as we have said, reincorporated what the animals and the plants and the stones can teach us with future consciousness, be able to take the carbon of the world and, as alchemists, bring forth and reproduce in a different way to which humanity now needs to do in a creation where dualism and dualities hold sway. So while at one level we haven't yet advanced beyond the biological bodies having to be used for reproduction, we are already moving in a direction where we can enhance our thoughts, take control of our thoughts, create imaginations, begin creation that we already have by creating machines in the industrial age. But in the future, we will also be able to harness the carbon that we produce in our bodies, and through a intensification, through development of our thinking and our feeling and then our creative will. If you remember, we were talking about the activity of karma, the balance of wisdom in our etheric body, and then the creative will that we will develop in the far future. The human beings will be able to move beyond biological reproduction and reproduce out of our gender qualities. These are really big ideas, very big future evolution pictures that require a fair bit of concentration. For some of us, this will be a fairly bold idea and fairly confronting to some of us, but for others it might be a relief that the future of humanity is going to be slightly different to that, and that we will transform the nature of the human body, that the dualistic bodies that we now live in will transform into something where the more feminine qualities of reproduction will be able to be harnessed by every individual. But that is a long future that we were looking at here. So some very big ideas in this lecture. I'm sure I haven't covered everything, but that we at some point, Rudolf Steiner says, have to transform the whole of the world around us. This is one of his pictures of evolution, is that we have to take in the human being. Our, so to say, place in creation is not to be a power place, but a place with a particular consciousness where through the human being, through our thinking and our feeling and our willing, we will take the whole of the world into us and we will create into it. So, for example, when we take stone and we change it into bricks and build a house, that already puts an idea into the matter. We take food into us and we humanize it through our bodies, and we place ideas and things beyond just emotions and the soul into matter, but that we are slowly starting to transform the whole of the earth into a much more spiritual nature. So while one could see that as an anthropocentric idea, Steiner also sees it as kind of like the leading edge of evolution. Animals, plants, stones also are going through an evolution of consciousness, and they are higher beings that are kind of assisting in that. We will slowly unpack that as we go through these lectures together. Hopefully these are not too complicated an idea. Might try to give a slight summary of that again. I know I'm repeating myself 2 or 3 times, but it is quite good to be able to go through these ideas 2 or 3 times to try and simplify them. So what Rudolf Steiner is trying to say is that as the human being unfolds, we will learn from studying, or the ants and the bees already give us a kind of direction which the creative and the changing of nature through the human being and through our art and our industry and our technology is to go in. One is that it will, in the sense that the ants and the bees have 3 parts to them. They have the queen, the drones, and a majority of the worker. That is what the human being, where we will create our identity, is the creative work that we as human beings do through bringing the material of nature, and especially carbon, through our ideas into art, into technology, and eventually, in the far distant future, we will also be able to go beyond gender-based reproduction and be able to reproduce by harnessing in an alchemical way through an individual human being, through the carbon that is produced within the human body. We will learn to use it as the philosopher's stone in an alchemical fashion to bring forth life in a different way to which we have in our current state. That, of course, is not just around the corner. It is sometime into the future that kind of reproduction will come. And as we go through the lectures, we will see that the place that we are learning at the moment to master and bring forth creativity is the spoken word. That the spoken word is the place where our thoughts can move into the world and bring about things already we can experience through the words. Possibly even just listening to me right now, it could be creating within you antipathy or sympathy. And if we can warm the ideas in the words, we can bring about new social orders. Of course, as we are working with society, as we are in them at the moment, these are things that are really quite challenging for us. How do we, in the world, I can see that we're being joined here by people from around the world. In fact, we are all in places where we are having to rethink how we're going to relate to each other, rethink how we run the economy, rethink how all sorts of things are going to happen. And through rethinking that, through how we speak to each other, new social forms will arise, but also new economic relationships. So through the human being's capacity to create an idea, and through the spoken word, by warming it, we bring about new creation. 1, in social forms, 2, possibly in the art and the artisanship that we have. So we see that into the future, this will become possible for us to, Steiner says that we will also be able to bring forth further things by harnessing the carbon within us as our capacity to idealize, to create an idea and warm it with our feeling and then bring it into the creative will in the future will transform ourselves. So there's some ideas from this lecture, huge ideas. There are many more lectures that Steiner gives in the future where these ideas are over many years he sort of unfolds and develops. So take the idea, sit with it. As I said, please hold it as a rentable idea, an idea with which you can say, I'm just holding this idea, I'm going to ponder it. I may have to let it go again because I don't agree with it. But it could also one of the ideas could make sense and accompany on your journey. Wish you well. I will post lecture 5 up on my Facebook page this evening and then give another comment on Wednesday. Stay safe, keep well, and keep talking to each other. Let us only physical distance, but keep socially warm. Okay, bye.